Hello and welcome. If you're new to my channel, my name is Christina, and in this week's video, I'm really excited to share 5 fun DIY projects with you. It's all about recreate, restyle, and recycle. So let's head over to project 1. Oh, I can't wait. We're gonna say goodbye.
Goodbye.
We're gonna say goodbye.
Goodbye.
You're gonna be very salt and pepper, you know that.
I know. That might be my new distinguished look.
Ryan hasn't had a haircut since COVID started, so he was pretty excited when we got to the city to run out and finally get his hair trimmed. It's been almost 2 years, so it's going to be a pretty drastic change.
Feels I feel like I can run faster and walk faster.
Less shampoo.
Less shampoo, less conditioner.
Less hair on my bathroom floor.
Yes, so now it's all your hair now, not mine.
I thought it might be fun to do a transformation on this adorable little secretary desk. It's a little bit in rough condition, but I think with some decorative ideas, I think we might be able to do something with this. Really important to clean any furniture piece really well with the TSP. This will really help for any painting project on a piece of furniture because of the oils and varnishes that are currently on it and anything else that has accumulated. Giving it a really good clean always helps with any adhesion of paint. Doesn't matter what kind of paint. I'm going to be using the Annie Sloan chalk paint with a base of French linen. I generally like to start with a moist paintbrush. Because that chalk paint is so thick, this just helps move that paint around really easy. Now, because I'm using a light tone on a very dark surface, I will probably use 2 coats, but I always like to use very thin coats. This way my paint doesn't clump up and get into the corners and crevices. I want to create texture, but I don't want my paint to get clumped up around those edges and corners. The texture I want to create is just using the bristles of the brush in random brush strokes. So just every which way, no rhyme or reason, just lots of cross hatching. This way it has a consistency. Also, what helps with edges and corners is using a small detailed brush. So this way your paint won't clump up when you're trying to get into the smaller details. I also found the small brush and a chippy brush really helpful, so that way I could paint the interior of the desk. I want to create a little bit of a color tone, so I'm going to use that Chateau Gray, which is a little bit of a light olive color. I'm going to also use some Enfleur, which is a brown color, and maybe even a little hint of graphite. Not sure yet. But I thought by using some decoupage, but in different shapes to add some different dimensions to this piece might be a lot of fun. So I'll generally use the Mod Podge and a disposable sponge brush when applying a decoupage. One thing I have recently learned I love is using cling wrap to help remove any creases and air bubbles from the decoupage paper. So I'm just going to cut out the exact shape of this so that way it fits firmly onto the outside desk portion, and it's actually going to fold over that little short top, so the paper will fold over that top ledge. I also had to cut out a little bit with an X-Acto knife so that way the actual hardware could actually come through the decoupage as well. The key with any decoupage is making sure your Mod Podge is evenly distributed. This way you don't have it too thick or too thin, that way the paper will adhere nice and evenly. So with that little piece of cling wrap, I'm just going to rub down the decoupage paper, again just removing any crevices and air bubbles. Now, because I'm decoupaging an old piece of furniture, what I do recommend is to actually be patient with that cling wrap, because you may have to go around a few times in order to remove the air pockets and those little tiny crevices. It's because the wood is not exactly 100% flat, so it just takes a little extra time and patience. Now that I've glued the top of it, I just want to be able to cut the paper where the desk opens, and then I'm going to continue on with the Mod Podge and the Decoupage. Again, nice even strokes with that Mod Podge, so this way the paper will adhere nice and smoothly. I always find it helpful too when I'm working with a large piece of decoupage is to actually try to hold up the bottom as you're trying to place it down nice and flat. I still had to go back and keep carving out some of the paper around that piece of hardware because I wanted it nice and even. The Mod Podge itself will actually look like a milky white but dries 100% clear. So if you do have a little bit on the outside of your decoupage or a little bit on the hardware, not to worry, it will dry 100% clear. I then went around with the Mod Podge on top of the decoupage to seal it. So the fun part about creating dimensions with your colors is just to have fun with it. Don't be afraid to blend. I am just going to stipple in some highlights and some lowlights with the other chalk paints. I also decided to add in a little Amsterdam green just to actually add more depth to that chateau gray. By stippling the paint, all I'm doing is, while it's still moist, is just kind of mashing it into each other. And this is also going to create new color tones of more highlights and lowlights. So that's what's going to give it all of this wonderful dimension. So I was kind of glad I decided not to put any of that graphite. It's almost like a charcoal black color. I just went with the Amsterdam green, and I'm just literally stippling it. So just kind of smashing it around a little bit. If you feel your colors are too dense, all I'm doing here is just grabbing that French linen and just kind of rubbing it back in. All you're going to keep doing is just playing, stippling, rubbing the paints around until you're happy with the color coding that you see. It's almost like putting a makeup on. All you're doing is shading it a little bit. Chalk paint is a wonderful decorative paint to play with, and it's water-based. So just by adding little hints of water, even with some spray bottle, or if you have a little cup of water on hand, keeping your moist paintbrush, this will allow the paint and the paint colors to have all kinds of fun and play. I generally will go around in sections and just have fun with the different color tones. There's no particular pattern I'm going by. I'm just going around to the edges to create a stronger, darker depth, and then different color hues towards the center of each panel and section I work on. Another way to create depth on furniture pieces is also to use the dark wax or a black wax, but I much prefer to use the paint to create those hues. Again, whatever you're more comfortable with, but don't be shy, just have some fun with it. So the other thing I want to do is to kind of blend in the colors with the decoupage. So I'm going to run some of the color across the decoupage just so it looks a little bit more cohesive. When you're getting into these stages, always remember less paint is best. You'll have more forgiveness and more fun using it. I generally will let the first base coat dry 100%. Then, as kind of my second coat, that's when I started blending in these different color depths. And I will once in a while just add a little tiny bit of water because the chalk paint is a very fast drying paint. So I'm going to add this decoupage to the inside of the secretary desk. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and actually, with a small thin chippy brush and as well as that little artist brush, go in and paint all of those little drawers and slots, so that way it has a nice fresh feeling. This particular desk was mostly veneer, and it really wasn't the strongest wood, and there's a lot of knocks and cracks and scrapes on it. So going with this particular kind of old world look is perfect for these vintage finds. The fun about using the decoupage paper is you're creating a little bit more of a story to the art of what you're painting. So I'm going to use these little daubers. It's almost like a little sponge, a little round sponge. So that way on the inside of the lower desk I can add in a stencil. I painted all of the inside underneath of the desk with that French linen. Now I'm using that Amsterdam green. I'm going to use a little bit of that brown on fleur. Then, once my whole stencil's done, I'm going to tap on a little bit more of the French linen. This will create a nice faded look. The fun thing about playing with stencils, if you don't like it or you don't feel you like the look of it, you can always just go back to that base color. So before I steal my project, I sometimes love to, just for the fun, is create these little fly specks with some black and white paint. I use a toothbrush, dip it into some water, add in a little tiny bit of paint, rub it into a towel. Then all I'm going to do with my fingertips is actually just brush it across the bristles of the toothbrush, and it's going to create these little tiny fly specks of paint. This to me just adds another dimension on top of what I've already created and gives it such a nice, fun, old world worn look. I'll just go over to the sides and towards the bottom and maybe a little tiny bit around the drawer pulls. But again, this is a total option and you can use any color you like. So for the hardware, I'm going to add in a little bit of that gilding wax in the bright silver. All I use is my fingers and I just rub it on, and it's going to create a much brighter look for your overall hardware, especially when it's original. You could use a copper, you could use the silver, or if you'd like, you could even use the gold. Once everything is completely dry, I am going to add in a little bit of clear wax, and the best thing is just apply it like a hand cream, and sometimes less is more. Just really important to use a lint-free cloth with your clear wax application. From the discovery of our recent move, I have found all kinds of fun things to upcycle and recycle, including this oval mirror. Now, the frame's badly scratched on it, and actually so is the mirror, but I thought, you know what, I love the shape of this, so let's see what else we could create, maybe even just trying a bit of a decoupage and some paints. So really important to clean the mirror as well as the frame really well before applying any paint or the decoupage. All the decoupage images that I've used will be found in the description box below. So similar to other projects I've done, it's all about the Mod Podge and a simple applicator. I like to use the disposable sponges. I just find this actually distributes the Mod Podge nice and evenly, which is exactly what I want when doing a decoupage. But if you have an old brush or if you have a chip brush, that will work as well. Again, the cling wrap, so this way we can evenly smooth out the decoupage once we apply that Mod Podge. So I'm going to cut out a fairly larger portion, and then I'll be able to go around and save the frame after I've applied the Mod Podge to the actual mirror. In other words, I'd rather cut it too big than too small. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the Mod Podge only to the mirror. Then I'm going to put down that decoupage, smooth it all out, and then I can recut the decoupage to open up the frame again before I start to paint it. Using this mirror is a very good example of something extremely flat. It doesn't have any pockets to it, it's not warped, so applying these very thin decoupages to a mirror is absolutely brilliant to create kind of an art piece. Unlike the wood, sometimes the wood can have some irregularities to it, whereas the mirror is relatively flat, so having air bubbles and creases is really easy to eliminate. Again, just use that little bit of cling wrap, and you're just going to go around in circles, and you're going to be able to smooth out those lines and air pockets. The main key, though, with any decoupage is making sure your Mod Podge is definitely evenly distributed. This way you're not going to get as many air pockets. So just using an X-Acto knife, this allowed me to cut out a nice straight, kind of an even cut all the way around the frame of this, so that way I can go back and paint the frame. But I want to actually paint the decoupage into the frame a little bit, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Because there was a little tiny, literally by millimeters, exposure from the decoupage from when I cut it to the frame, and the frame actually sits up a little bit, so I found it to make it look more cohesive and a little bit more natural looking, I decided to actually paint a little bit of the frame onto the decoupage, so that way you couldn't see any of the mirror. I'm just using the Annie Sloan chalk paint in that French linen as a base, and I'm just going to go around and tap it in, what we call that stipple motion, and this is going to just create a little extra texture on that frame. Then I'd like to create a little bit of low light, and I'm going to use that dark charcoal / black chalk paint in the graphite. So while the French linen is still moist, I'm just going to go around with a little tiny chip brush, and I'm just going to keep stabbing in the paint and keep blending, so this way I can have some highlights and lowlights by just using those two color tones, French linen and the graphite. Because this is a thin frame, instead of using water, because I don't want to spray any water onto the paper and reactivate anything or smear it or even potentially tear it, I will just go around and keep adding in that graphite, and then when I want to create a little bit more of a highlight again, I'll just keep adding more of the French linen. So I'm only using the paint, but I'm not using any water. Once everything is done, I'll seal it with a clear wax. I'm just using a clear vase that I had, and it's probably even something you can pick up at a dollar store. I'm going to clean it really well, and what I want to show is how easy it is to create beautiful decor just using air plants. Air plants are epiphytes, meaning that in nature they grow on other plants. Don't let the lack of soil scare you away. Air plants are easy to care for once you know what they need. So I was able to pick up some crushed fine and a little bit coarser of, it's almost like a sand, but it's actually crushed rocks in 2 different colors. So I'm going to add a little bit of the white, and then this little bit of a sand color, just a neutral beigey tone, and then I'm going to add a little bit of white again, about almost halfway up this vase. Then, similar to a terrarium, you can add in other little elements from natural things like rocks. You could even use some seashells, You could also even use a little bit of the aquarium, that natural gravel, which is nice because it comes in all of these natural little earth tones. There's also some different tone colors when it comes to using a little bit of moss. So I think I'm going to add the little bit of seashells, and again, you can actually find these in dollar stores, or you could even go to one of those specialty kind of plant shops. I actually picked up this air plant at the Home Depot. But generally the nurseries will carry these, and they're relatively inexpensive depending on their size. I didn't realize when I started this project if the air plant would actually even fit, because once I put them together I got a little concerned, but it just made it. Now the thing is, air plants have very little root to them, and to care for them is actually really easy. Because air plants don't have roots like other plants, they only have a few short ones, with a few of the short ones which are meant to help hold it into whatever surface it's on. So to care for it in your home, all you'll need to do is water your air plant about once a week. So if you're able to, you could even just use a spray mist bottle and give your air plant a nice drink about that once a week. Because this is not an enclosed situation, the air plants also too need to be in a lit area, but not in direct sunlight. So these make beautiful home decor or gift ideas. I've had this textured vase for a really long time, and it's taken a toll, especially even through the move. There's a lot of scratches on it now and a lot of scuffs to it. So I thought, you know what, let's try something new for a different type of look other than this opaque glass look. I thought maybe going with a ceramic look might be kind of fun. So I'm going to use the paints that I have, which is that Enfleur, the brown, that French linen, and some old white. I'm going to use chalk paint, but if you don't have chalk paint, I do recommend that you could even use a little bit of baking powder and some regular household paints or colors or even acrylics that you have to make the similar texture that I am with the chalk paint. I'm going to use 3 separate chip brushes. This way I can create lots and lots of texture. But the vase itself already has a texture to this type of glass, but the paint's going to kind of override that a little bit, and it's also going to help me blend my colors. So from the top of the vase around the neck, I'm getting about a quarter way down. Now I'm going to add in that French linen color. And again, just using the stippling of almost mashing the colors together, it's actually going to create a little bit of a halo, so as if it would just naturally just kind of darkened and lightened on its own. So it's almost even going to have a little bit of a stone look to it when I'm done because of the added texture I'll be making with the chalk paint. So I don't want the colors to have a dead-on sequence. I want it to be very random. So starting with the old white at the top, graduating it into that French linen, then I'll get into the really dark chocolate brown at the very bottom. Stippling the colors into each other is also going to create a new tone, but just going back, you can use the same brush if you're comfortable to do so. I'm actually showing you for the demonstration that using the 3 different brushes, that way if you override one too dark, you can always go back to the lighter color, and just keeping them separate just makes it a little bit easier, especially for a beginner. For my first coat, I was a little bit liberal with the paint, but as I get into my second coat, going around the same cascade of colors, I'm going to use very, very little paint. And again, I'm just using some very neutral, natural tone colors, but if you wanted to use something that's actually going to put a little pop into a new decor, by all means, this is a great way to practice painting on old decor pieces, such as vases. And because there's no real specific right or wrong, All you're doing is smashing the paint colors into each other, and you can create the halo of the color coding that you want. Again, because you're creating a texture with a thick paint, whether you created the paint with a little bit of the baking powder or you're using a thick paint like chalk paint, it's just a lot of fun. It's very therapeutic, and it's a great way to restyle and recreate, but you're also recycling. The perfect home decor and texture, as well as warmth and cozy, the super chunky blanket. Using the Barnett chenille in the chunky yarn, I want to demonstrate how easy it is. This is a quick and fun way to whip up a blanket in just a couple of days using the basket weave. You don't have to have experience to do this. First thing you're going to do is make a slip knot. So pretty easy. Once you have that, you're going to stick your crochet hook in. I'm using a 12mm crochet hook. For the demonstration of this blanket, I am actually going to chain 13 stitches. For the blanket I created, I chained 60 stitches. So to start your chain of posts, that's what we're going to create. What we're going to do is yarn over that crochet hook, and you're going to go into the second loop. The reason is because you're just starting your chain of posts by doing a double crochet. It is very, very easy. As you can see, you're going to yarn over your crochet hook, and you're going to go into the next stitch. The reason we started into the second stitch is because we created 2 posts. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. Then you're going to create a double crochet. Really, really easy. Sometimes it's just easier just to watch and create a mimic that you can remember. So use your crochet hook, go into the stitch. You're going to have 3 loops. Then you're going to take away 2. Then you're going to take away 2 again. That's going to leave you 1 stitch, and you're just going to keep repeating. It's the best thing I can say for anybody who's starting out is to actually start with a little sample swap, just like I've got. Start with 13 stitches and do this exact method until you're comfortable making the posts and crocheting into the post to do the basket weave. Practice a couple times, I guarantee it, you will get it down in no time. Now you just saw me chain 2 extra stitches. The reason is you're going to do that at the end of every single row of your blanket. That's why we started into the second chain when we started. Yarn over. Now you're going to use your posts. We're going to do 2 front posts doing a double crochet. So again, really, really easy. You're going to yarn over, and as you can see, you're making posts. So going into the next post, front post, yarn in, remove 2 stitches, remove 2 stitches, yarn over again. Now we want to do a back post stitch. So you're going to go behind your work into the post, doing the exact same thing. Again, yarn over, go into the post, you'll have 3 loops, then remove 2, then remove 2 again. Yarn over. Now we're going to go into that front post. You're going to do it in sections of 2. 2 front posts, 2 back posts, 2 front posts, 2 back posts. As I say, it's really helpful just to make a little swap like I am of just a practice run of this waffle stitch. It's going to feel a little bulky and kind of weird at first. Once you have a couple of rows going, it will start to kind of even and make a rhythmic pattern, and it will be easier to hold and it won't twist so much. You will be doing 2 full rows of the same front posts and the same back posts. Then we're going to go ahead and reverse it. Once we do the reverse, you'll do 2 rows of the reverse. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So now I have the first half of a waffle. It almost looks like squares. So you see the 2 front posts, those are the 2 back posts. So really important to chain 2, reverse your work. The front posts are going to be vertical and the back posts are going to be horizontal. Now we want to switch it. So what was a front post, I'm now going to do a double crochet into making it a back post now. And I'm going to do 2 full rows of the exact same I just did, but in reversed. So those were back posts. Now I'm going to make them front posts. That's all you need to know for this entire blanket. Because this is so thick, it's going to stitch up very, very quickly. Now you can start to see the waffle effect taking place. So again, just going in reverse, what was a front post, I'm doing a back post. Again, just doing the same double crochet. I can generally stitch one of these up in a day or 2, but there's no rush. Don't feel rushed when you're doing it. Enjoy the process. It's actually very repetitive, but it's also very therapeutic. Again, really easy to do the double crochet. So you're going to yarn over, go into the post, remove 2 hoops, remove 2 hoops, yarn over again. So you always have 2 loops on your crochet hook. So again, just repeating the double crochet, going in the reverse, and I'll do 2 rows. The waffle stitch can come in rows of 3 posts, front and back, or even 4. But I find as a newbie, the best is to do 2 front, 2 back, and flip it. So you have 2 rows of each. So again, 2 front posts, 2 back posts, make 2 rows, reverse. It's really easy to forget, I know I've done it, those 2 extra stitches at the end of each row. The main reason you're doing that, not just from the beginning, is because you're actually creating 2 posts at the same time when you go into your next stitch. You only need to go into the second stitch when you start your first row of posts. After that, you're always going into your first post. Because we're doing a thick yarn at a double crochet and we're making it quite bulky with the waffle stitch, we're literally creating 2 inches every row with this blanket, so it does stitch up really quickly. I don't know the exact measurements of this blanket, but it would be considered a more larger throw blanket, starting with 60 stitches. But you can make it bigger or you can make it smaller. But there's no limit to how big or how small you want to make your throw blanket. It's all about having fun. I did use for this entire blanket 4 balls of the chenille yarn. This yarn is fantastic for busy households because if you like to wash your throw blankets quite frequently, it's machine washable and dryable. I've been getting a lot of amazing comments on more of the finger knitting or crochet, or to even demonstrate how to do an arm knitting. So if that's something you're interested in, please let me know in the comments below. The main reason too you're adding those extra 2 stitches is so that way you can keep a nice straight edge on either side of your blanket. I can't put enough emphasis on making sure you add those 2 stitches because I remember the first few blankets I made, I forgot to do that and I couldn't understand why there would be all these different waves or curves. That's just the way the crochet pattern works, and once you've done it and you've made the mistake, you're less likely to do it again. Super easy to reattach a new ball of yarn. Literally just going to tie a little tiny knot. With such a bulky yarn like this, you can trim the little tails, but if you do it small enough, you don't really need to because it'll just stitch in and you won't even see that you've made a little tie for starting a new row. When you're ready to stop your blanket with crocheting, it is so easy. When you get to your very last stitch, before you do anything, all you're going to do is snip off your yarn, and you're going to take the tail of that and you're going to tie it into that last stitch and pull it nice and tight. Then you can either cut off the tail. Generally, I just weave it into the actual blanket and it's safe and secure and you won't even see. Which one was your favorite project? Are you licking the furniture? You do that. You lick the furniture. He licks the furniture. I don't know why he licks the furniture, but he licks the furniture. You really shouldn't lick the furniture. But you're so lovable. Look at that face. Look at that face. Oh my God, look at that face. Now he looks like he's part of the furniture. Thank you so much for watching this week's video, and please let me know in the comments below which one your favorite project was. I have so many more fun DIYs, room makeovers, and furniture transformations to share with you soon. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and notification bell. That's going to tell you when I upload my next video. And until then, take care, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you soon.